And we're back.
Welcome back to Beyond the Signs podcast.
I'm your co-host, Omar Hamouda.
And I'm your fellow co-host, 𝐅𝐎𝐋𝐋𝐿𝐼.
In today's episode, we thought it'd be a continuation of the last episode that we were talking about, which was one of the ideas that we came up with, and I wanted to jump and talk about it.
Yeah, no, agreed.
So today's topic is about, or this episode's topic is about, how did social media affect us when we kind of dove in from the age gap of me after high school and you're after
Before high school.
Before high school.
Mm-hmm.
And just to keep everyone like reference for everyone is that I had my first social media account when I was 18. So that would be Instagram. And you had it when you were 12 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And it was actually a really funny moment for me because from the get-go when I joined Instagram, and keep in mind, I did have Facebook at the time, but it wasn't that I considered it as a social media platform, because for me, like, the moment I had an iPhone, or I think at the time it was an iPhone 4, and Instagram was downloaded on it, that's when I consider it social media, because you're able to be social on it on the go.
Yeah.
Rather than, like, at the time, Facebook was on my laptop, and
Agreed. Facebook was on the computer. Yeah.
Yeah. And like most of the time we didn't even use it because it was like, okay, I don't want to be on my computer all the time. I want to be outside doing something with friends.
I used it a lot, actually. Yeah, as a kid.
So
that's a difference.
But that's
the difference.
But here's the thing. You got on social media when you were 12 years old and you had a smartphone at the time, right?
Yes.
For me, I had my very first smart actual phone was when I was 18 going into college, right?
That's crazy.
And I'll never...
I think my first smartphone was in middle school.
Really?
Truthfully, yeah, for sure.
Okay, so middle school, because I didn't go to a traditional like middle school. Mm-hmm. It was like a hybrid of a middle school and a high school together. So like I went into...
I think we've talked about this before, have we?
I think so.
Huh.
I think so.
Not in grave detail, but...
But basically, like for me, like middle school is kind of a gray area because I know middle school you're there when you're in 6th grade. I didn't go into my middle school until when I was in 7th grade. Mm-hmm. And it was like from 7th to 12th. But getting back to the topic is that I remember the first moment I actually joined Instagram. It was a friend of mine who I actually just was talking to the other day and tell him like, dude, do you remember when you put me on Instagram? He's like, dude, that was a while ago. He literally told me there's this new app called Instagram and he only has 25 followers, but like it's hard to get followers. I was like, okay.
Hard to get followers.
But here's the funny thing is at the time I joined
this was all new.
Yeah, at the time I joined it. That first night I was like, I don't know what to do, so I started posting drawings that I used to do, right? Mm-hmm. The next morning I had 100 followers. And I saw him the very next day, and he goes like, how many followers do you have? I'm like, I have 100. He goes, what the hell did you do? I'm like, I don't know. I just posted pictures of my drawing, and I guess I got like following afterwards. So most of my like initial followers were there just from drawing, and I still communicate to some of those people that I do till now. Like I had 2 of them that I remember. That like one, I think he was from Brazil, and another one from Louisiana.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And it's funny because like at the time I was going into architecture school, very heavily like in the arts and like drawing section. So like I would post up like architecture stuff that I was like drawing or like any projects that I was doing just to upload it. And that's how like people understood that I was like the artsy type on Instagram, like sort of like. But here's the thing. I didn't dive into it that much because at the same time, it was just a place for me to communicate with my friends and see what they were doing after high school.
It was more localized.
Exactly. Like I didn't like really venture out until after college. That's when I really dove in because here's the thing. Like for me is that at the time I was focusing on my school. Totally. And I think that's where my principal and like the previous episode we were talking about is that the reason why, like, I don't think like that whole, like maybe it was, maybe it could have been different if I actually really focused on social media back then. But at the time I was just focusing on graduating, getting a good job, making sure that, what's it called? That I knew what I was doing. so that way I can focus on like the future careers I would get and stuff like that. But yeah, like I want to hear more about yours though.
Yeah, totally. So that's so interesting to me that you didn't really, that you were able to, I mean, obviously you were older, you were able to prioritize kind of like what needed to come first at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And also like you weren't doing it that seriously, and it wasn't what it is now for sure, for even anybody who's not doing anything creative or doing anything with their business related to social media. But when I first started social media, I was so young. Facebook was before Instagram, like we said. So Facebook was probably like 9 or 10 for me, was when, or maybe even younger, was when Facebook came around. And by the time Instagram came around, I was like 11 or 12, and I was in either 7th or 8th grade. And everything I posted was just for, like, I don't know, people that I went to middle school with. I had 21 kids in my graduating 8th grade class in middle school. So there weren't that many people. It was just a small circle of people that I was interacting with on social media, or that I was like posting, with or for or whatever. And it wasn't until high school that it became like freshman, sophomore year that it started transforming into something different. Because also like 14, 15, so like freshman year of high school was when I really started realizing I had a passion for photography. So that's when I actually started like shooting with my friends and things like that. So then my social shifted towards a more like artsy, like you were saying, a more artsy, not just sharing my life, but also sharing the art that I'm creating with my friends. And it became a lot more about that. And that really shifted. But before that, it was just trying to like, I don't know, post for like your, the 30 people that are seeing what you're doing. And that was truly it. That was all that was looking. But it was crazy because I cared at such a young age. Like I started to care what I looked like to my friends on the internet and to the people that I knew who were on these platforms at the time. And I started to care about like how I looked and how they perceived me. And like from a young age, it just was not healthy. And I was exposed to it really young. And that's why I can't imagine, like we were saying in our last episode, the kids now who are exposed to it so much younger, even, almost 10 years younger than I was exposed to it. You have kids 3-4 years old, just like sitting on iPads all day. And I'm really curious to see like what happens when those kids end up being teenagers. And like we've already seen the age of like TikTok and these young kids coming up on TikTok and blowing up, and that's not natural. And to have that many eyes on you at such a young age for like a seemingly like normal kid, you know what I mean? Look at how Charli D'Amelio got to be who she is today. She was a normal kid living in Connecticut, going to school, and just started posting dancing TikToks and just blew up. And, some may say her life is wonderful now, but she also deals with a ton of online bullying and hate every day. And like worries so much probably about how she's perceived online, because people just will attack her for anything, because she's under a microscope now basically. And I feel like she was part of that generation that's like just a little bit younger than me, only a few years younger than me, that was just exposed to it maybe just a little too young. And I was exposed to it, I think, too young personally, but I still ended up all right. You know what I mean?
Right. And I guess like I'm technically in the millennial phase, right? Mm-hmm. So like my generation, I'm a millennial, whatever that word is, right?
You're a millennial, yes.
Yeah. So what's funny is that like a lot of us are saying that like the next generation is screwed, right? I don't necessarily think that.
I don't think they're screwed.
I'll explain what I mean by that,
sure.
Right? Because as we get going with the generations, right? We intend to like the past generation looks onto the future generation, and we mold that generation to that that's next. So even though like the generation behind me, I guess the boomers, right, look at like Gen Z and Gen X or whatever they're called, and they're like, oh, we're screwed because like all they do is just dance online. But like, that's the thing. Like, we're kind of setting up the, like, one, you set up the not the platform, but you set up the platform and the road for them to be able to do this. So like, that means like we're like
they're just using the platforms that were
provided,
developed and marketed towards them.
Exactly.
And they're young and impressionable, and they're like, oh, this is a new social media app. Here we go. Let's go.
Kind of like, for example, like back then it was funny enough, like the reason why like dryers and washing machines were used is to free up time, because like drying the process of washing clothes and drying clothes, women would take like all day. Like it would be like a whole one day going down to the river drying and all that stuff, or whatever, how they used to do it, right? Now it's drying machines to kind of like free up that time. But here's the thing, we freed up that time and now we still don't have time, right? And that's where like now we're paving this whole generation where it's getting lazier. But like that frees up, that also begs the question, it's like, now that we're doing all this, now there's more time to do other things, and we're building for a better generation, right? I think there are like these like kids who are actually not doing like being on the platform and stuff like that. I think they're the ones who are gonna excel. Right now, it's just that we see all this, and the funny thing is, like you said, they're on a microscope and everyone's zooming onto them. Yeah. So everything is going to be publicized about them, because like that's the only thing that everyone sees.
For example, if we're talking about like going along with my example of Charli D'Amelio, like she didn't mean for that to happen. I don't think, like she was just posting with her friends.
And keep in mind,
she was just being a kid. She was literally like 14 or 15.
And keep in mind, that's such a small population. But the problem is that,
I know, it's mind blowing.
Yeah. But the thing is, people see it as like, oh, these are all these kids, like generalizing that all kids are like that, but not really necessarily. Like, yeah, we have like, it seems like that, but not
There's
really.
A lot of people sucked into the cons of social media, right, that are like sucked into the toxicity that social media like breeds, in a sense, for different factors like mental health and, regular health, physical health, like everything. It affects
There's goodness in the platform, right? But what I'm trying to say also too is like, I guess like how we got into it is a lot more different than everyone's introductions to social media. Some of them are like, for example, those parents who are trying to like be a social media star, like a social media family. But like, now you're raising those kids to be like those, and like,
that's a very specific thing to talk about, and that applies to less people than I was just talking about. But
exactly. So it really depends on don't focus on the people on social media who are actually big and like it's part of their generation, because that's just a small population. And then you have other people, like, I kid you not, most of the people who are on social media, if you look at it, they're mostly American kids.
Well, yes.
Americans and Canadians, some of them.
Yeah.
But like, you look at other countries out in Europe.
They don't have the same addiction problem to social media or the internet as we seem to have as Americans. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's funny because they've installed principles. Over here, I feel like we don't have that principle that other countries do. And it's not the fault of like, I don't want to say it's the fault of us. What I want to say, it's more or less like how the market is oversaturated by like showing us these things like over and over again. Like you have kids like outside who have like, for example, like in Switzerland, right? Sunday, it's known for family time. There's no, like, all stores are closed. No one's on their phone. I literally, while I was walking there one time, I was on my phone and people looked at me like I was doing something wrong because of the fact Sunday is known for family time.
Switzerland's doing it right.
Yeah. Well, that's an example that I'm trying to say. It's to that extreme where I look different and that population.
I always thought that, I was like, you know, I never wanted to say that it was because of my parents for giving me these things. First of all, I was probably begging for them when I was a kid. And second of all, this was all new to my parents as well. And they didn't know what might be too detrimental for me growing up to give me a certain like iPhone or a MacBook or like things like that, or a camera, like a camera's different, but like a laptop or a phone, like access to, like, you know, they didn't know what that technology would transform into. So they're just like, and at the same time that I was first joining Instagram, I also was playing my DS every day because I was literally that young. I was so young.
Right.
And comparison to the fact that like you were on your way to college when that was happening, like you had such a different introduction to it that it allowed you to kind of be like, okay, I'm already like pretty much an adult. I'm still figuring out my shit, but like I'm pretty much an adult, and I know that like I'm not gonna like let this get to, you know, I'm going to focus on what I got to do right now. You know what I mean?
Right, because
like,
it never manifests to what it is now.
Right.
And you have to understand, too, is like, it's not the
For me, I didn't have anything else to do because I was so young.
Right.
So I just got sucked into it.
You're an impressionable child, right, at that point. Marketing, like, here's the thing.
I gobbled up everything that was on. All the ads that were on Facebook and Instagram and all that.
The actual method, like process when it comes to marketing, right?
Yeah.
You market to little kids because here's the thing. Mm-hmm. They start to nag and want it and all that stuff, and they're going to go up to their parents, right? Parents don't understand what it is, so they'll end up getting it for them.
Right.
I'll never forget when Yu-Gi-Oh came out. I want to say I was like 8 years old at the time, and like literally Yu-Gi-Oh cards were like the biggest thing when I was there, right? And I was telling my dad, like, I want Yu-Gi-Oh cards, right? Mm-hmm. He didn't understand what it was. He thought it was just like cards, right? Mm-hmm. But like when I got them, I'll never forget that day where once I picked it up, my father like literally snatched it, threw it back on the counter. He's like, we're leaving, right? And his mentality was he didn't understand what it was, and he thought it was, I'm going to be a little bit like honest here, but he thought there were like devilish cards, like those tarot cards.
Oh, he thought they were tarot cards.
He thought it was tarot cards. Because he didn't understand what it was. Because in the show, also too, the show doesn't.
Yeah, if you're religious, you probably don't.
Yeah, because the thing is, like, if
tarot cards.
Yeah, if you really look at it, it's like once you put it down, a monster gets summoned.
Yeah, the way they're looking at it.
Yeah, like if you really think about it, like it does sound like demonic stuff, but at the same time, it's like in the show they emphasize that it's a simulation,
and that's just, as parents, it just shows like they're trying their best, but they don't know what's what.
Exactly.
So if they end up giving their kid the wrong thing, that ends up getting them a little more, like, so much more consumed into that like world of whatever it is, which at that time it wasn't even social media, it was cards, which is really sick.
Exactly.
And like that's definitely not what a lot of kids are being exposed to nowadays. It's more like, yeah, like this game or that app, or you know, this trend on TikTok or this thing, and making these videos, and it's crazy.
And if you look at the actual like research behind most of what social media tries to do, it's trying to grab your attention for like not like a short span. They're trying to get a short span, so you get that dose of like dopamine.
I was just gonna say that.
Keep reeling you in, and that's why like
social media is such a dopamine fix.
The meaning behind real,
yes,
is it's just too real.
Yes,
you know what I mean. It's like a reel, like they're trying to reel you in.
Yeah,
and then like these TikTok where it's like, oh, it's like 15 minutes or 15 seconds, so you see like that short, like
it's a little glimpse, and it's like shortcuts of like different, you know, shots and things like that, and it's so fast paced that it keeps the person engaged and it keeps their mind interested in watching the video. Because if you watch like too long of it, we were just talking about this the other day for our social media and how we market our reels, because you're like, well, if it's too long of a video, like all these different factors go into it, you know?
Oh, absolutely. And then like,
if you don't grab the person within the first like 3 to 5 seconds of the video, then their attention's lost and they're not going to watch the rest. And it's so specific, and the algorithm is a whole nother topic that I could talk about for so long.
And you want to hear something crazy about the algorithm. Let's say for TikTok, right? You get that nice like clearance of dopamine, right? Because you enjoyed it once, you want to enjoy it again. Here's the thing. They know what videos you want to see. They don't show it, so you're scrolling up for hours trying to find a video to kind of like satisfy you. Once you find that video, it satisfies you, but you want more.
Yeah.
So you keep scrolling up and up and up.
They literally, I mean, I don't know if you've seen it personally, but I'm sure most people who are on TikTok who will watch this video, have seen, like, if you're scrolling on TikTok for a while, there's a video that comes up. You scroll down that one last time, and there's a video of somebody saying, "Stop. Hold on, you've been scrolling for way too long." And like, they literally make these videos if they've noticed you've been scrolling for like more than an hour or an hour and a half or something, whatever it is. And they'll be like, "Hold on, why don't you stop and go take a snack and take a quick break and come back later?" And like, they literally like tell you to TikTok has to tell you to get off the app. Isn't that scary? They have to they make these videos of somebody in their house just standing there going, "Stop."
You know, the reality of that is that they want to seem that they're they're telling you, "Hey, you should get off." But then it's more of less, it's that whole like notion of your parents tell you to do something, you're going to do the
opposite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're like,
all right.
They're like telling you, "Hey, get off the app," but they're like, "You're going to be back on."
Their algorithm is way too complicated for them not to know what they're doing.
Right.
They know what they're doing. But.
And I guess that honestly, that's a whole nother topic for another time. So like really talking about the algorithm, and like I see it as an evil thing.
Yeah.
Which could be like a benefit, but at the same time it's marketing.
It has so many negatives. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's crazy, but I'm really glad we got to talk about this. A little addition to our last episode.
Right.
Part 2.
So basically just stay off the app until you're 24.
Yeah, is that the consensus here? Don't go on social media. It's not good. Not good for
Except
this.
if you want to watch Beyond the Signs, Beyond, right? I said behind.
Yeah, you did say behind.
Okay, so unless if you guys want to watch Beyond the Sign podcast, that's the only time you're
in that case, go right to all of our social medias
right here. But don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the bell notification to know when we do post. And with that being said, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And we'll see you all next time.
See you next time.
Bye-bye for now.